The Ratchet and Clank series has been one of the many franchises that I grew up playing, but I didn't really play them that extensively as a child. Sure, I finished most of the games, but after that I just went back to Sonic and Mega Man. Revisiting them years later, I've lightened up on these games. The Ratchet and Clank games are extreme fun when all I want to do is jump on platforms, shoot some creative-ass weapons, with upgrades also being a focus of the weapons. I always felt like I was progressing in a Ratchet and Clank game, whether it be through finding the secrets, the golden bolts, or actually progressing the story, or just grinding for regular bolts. And I've gone up to where I have played the most recent entry, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is, like I said, the newest entry in the series, and this game really tries to focus on improving all of what the 2016 movie reboot game did, while adding its own bits of gameplay changes and new characters to keep the world fresh and to keep the gameplay interesting. Along with improving the series visuals with the power of the PlayStation 5. Full disclosure, I recorded some of the gameplay in fidelity mode, which runs the game at 4K 30 with ray tracing. Later I switched it to performance RT mode, which keeps the ray tracing but removes the 4K to get 60 frames per second. So the footage may look different in between some cuts, and I apologize in advance for that. With all that being said, let's start playing the content that was put onto the disc. Since this is a platformer, the plot doesn't get too focused on, so we'll just do a basic quick summary. A female Lombax named Rivet is introduced at the start, really only to show that she's the hero type, you know. Meanwhile, we move back on over to Ratchet and Clank, who are getting ready for the hero parade. Clank has a surprise gift for Ratchet. Well, I don't know if it's a surprise if Captain Quirk just announces it right at the start of the parade.
The stage store for you, starting with me, and ending with a surprise gift from Clank to Ratchet.
But anyway, the Blarg invade the parade, but Ratchet kicks their shit in and progresses. It turns out Clank rebuilt the Dimensionator to help Ratchet find the rest of the Lombaxes. I'm assuming this proves Ratchet PS4 was a remake and not a reboot. Ratchet is hesitant, but before that gets noticed, Dr. Nefarious takes the Dimensionator. So we have to take chase. We catch up to him, and he sends the duo through dimensions until we reach the dimension where Nefarious wins. Ratchet loses Clank, so he starts searching. Rivet finds Clank and takes him to her hideout to understand what's happening with the dimensional rift. Ratchet finds Rivet and Clank, but before he can say anything, they fly away. Ratchet asks Mrs. Zircon, your weapon seller in this game, where to find a spaceship to go after them, and he gets directed towards the progression and gets going. From that point, it's just a journey through space dealing with Dr. Nefarious and his shenanigans, letting us learn more about Rivet and what led her up to where she is now, while further exploring Ratchet's indecisiveness to meeting with other Lombaxes. Fight loads of enemies, eventually the big bad Nef, and finish the game with a 69% completed save file. Yes, I am not kidding, this was not done on purpose. The plot is simple enough for a cartoony space platformer, and it's very fun to experience the whole way through. Nothing that's going to blow your mind, but effectively enjoyable enough to not feel like a waste of time, especially since this game has some pretty good writing. Just don't go in expecting extremely expressive cutscenes with sadness and anger and all that shit. Just go in expecting a fun video game plot. As you may have noticed, this game's purpose wasn't really to tell a story. It was to be a fun video game. So how does this game play? Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart may be my new favorite in the Ratchet and Clank series, all just because of the environments, the seamless transitions from cutscene to gameplay that keeps the game flowing beautifully. There isn't a single loading screen in the game, and that is impressive, especially since this game likes to show off its beautiful landscapes and character designs. The levels are more open-ended than previous games in the series, and with the addition of a run button, it honestly makes these areas super fun to explore. Later on you get the jet boots, and those may just be the most fun addition of all of them, just because of the fact that the haptic feedback triggers on the controller, you have to press those left, right, or however you want to start using the boots. It doesn't matter which way you start it up, but you feel the boots engines push your fingers back until you launch, and it's so cool. The PS5 controller in general, after my first experience with it, is just really satisfying, and I can now understand why they added all the stuff that they did to this controller. If enough heart is put into the development of a game, If they use the controller properly, they can use it really well. Along with changes into the main gameplay and changes to level design to be more open, this game just has the general standard gameplay that you'd expect from a Ratchet and Clank game. Creative-ass weapons to blast enemies with, and some of the best combat in a platformer. Ratchet and Clank thrives off of the combat, and Rift Apart does combat excellently. By the halfway point of the game, you will most likely have all the weapons, which may cause some to think that the combat starts getting old, with no new gadgets to try out, but that's where the weapon upgrades come in handy. I always felt influenced to try out the new weapons to level them up and apply more upgrades to them. I wanted to use all of the weapons in different ways just to see all of the practical applications for them. Some weapons are better than others, but using all the weapons freely makes this game fun for me. I have seen this game compared to Doom Eternal and saying that the weapons should have been designed to be switched between to fit each new situation in a fight. But keep in mind that Ratchet and Clank is aimed more towards a general audience, while Doom Eternal was meant for the just matured gamer, I guess. Kids could get stuck if they had to deal with that type of design. Besides, I think that both gameplay styles can coexist. Doom Eternal is super rewarding because of the amount of time you spend trying the fights with new approaches and changes to your temps, all while you're changing weapons and moving to keep everything going. You never really stop in Doom Eternal, and the weapons complement that with their differences and applications. Ratchet and Clank requires you to pay attention to the enemies in a different way. They don't chase you down, they aim towards you, so you need to find effective cover and look through your arsenal. Decide what weapons could help in your situation and go for it. Turn some enemies into shrubs to either pick them from the fight or to leave them alone for you to fight again later. Lock onto enemies with small rockets to get health down on more than just one enemy, or even just focusing one enemy down with high damage to get a move on in the fight. There are several different ideas you can have with a full arsenal. Honestly, I could argue that the earliest parts of the game are the most bland due to having a small amount of weapons, but even then it gets you comfortable with the combat of the game, so it's not really a negative. While the combat is very open-ended and the worlds are rather open-ended as well, platforming never gets too complicated, which could be seen as a flaw, but I think the exploration is strong enough to keep me interested throughout. Speaking of the levels, look at this fucking game, dude. This is currently the prettiest game I have ever played graphically. Also, I like the options in the game for 4K 30 FPS with ray tracing, 1080p 60 FPS with ray tracing, or without ray tracing if you don't really like it. This game looks, runs, and plays beautifully. Most of this footage is ray traced at 60 FPS because it looked great and I don't have a 4K display. This isn't my favorite game in terms of presentation, but having a cartoony style game like this with next-gen graphical capabilities makes this game look absolutely beautiful. I could gawk at these visuals all day, so let's move on to the soundtrack. It's okay. The soundtrack works and fits with the game, but it didn't really leave any impact on me. I don't remember any certain part of the game with their music. I guess since it fit the game well, it technically wasn't a bad soundtrack. I just can't remember a single bit of it. I'm probably going to play them in the background of this video, just because it would fit. After a full 69% completed save file, I can safely say that this game just rules, dude. This is probably one of my favorite games of 2021 so far, and has thoroughly convinced me that I will want a PS5 for myself at some point. Hello everyone, it's me again. Just wanted to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this type of review. I know it wasn't super funny, but I do want to just kind of get my thoughts out on a game in a video format that isn't relatively long unless I have a lot to say, because I've just been trying to play more games, more new experiences. May go back to games that I finished in the past year and evaluate my opinions on them, play them a little more, even though I've already finished them, but like play them to get footage and everything. I just thought that I would like to do that. If I hate the process of it, then this might be the only one that comes out, but I liked writing for it, so I'm assuming that once I get to the editing portion, this is fine. Since this is on the outro, this is probably just sounding weird since I'm talking about the editing process, even though the video's already done for people watching. But I'm working on a couple of other bigger projects too that I want to have out before the end of the year. I know one of them should be finished by then, The other one may take a bit longer because I'm still going through other parts of the production. But if I get my creative mind, I guess would be the right term, into gear, I should be able to crank out one of those bigger ideas. In the meantime, I might just do reviews like this, where I can talk about my opinions on a game, and then you guys can watch, you can just watch it. I have other bigger videos planned as well, but I'm still working on 2 pretty big projects, so we'll get there when we get there. But for now, thank you for watching, and I hope you look forward to the next bit of video I do. Whatever. Goodbye!